Thanks very much to everyone. 4 very interesting presentations, I felt. So we're ready for some questions. If there are any from the floor to kick us off. If not, I do have one myself. My experience in the sort of last 2 or 3 years when the heat was started to be turned up underneath premium publishers was that the relationship with clients became harder to navigate, a bit less friendly. The publishers are being put to the sword a bit more. And there's been a lot of talk about the dominance of Facebook and Google, which is convenient but not necessarily the complete answer. Do you think that clients need to do something about this and help premium publishers who are coping with a lot of challenges come up with solutions? And if you think perhaps they could, in what way could they help publishers acquit themselves better and utilize their audiences more effectively? Does anyone want to volunteer for that?
Well, I mean, there's stuff that clients could do, advertisers could do. They could spend more, but they won't do that, and it's unfair to put it on them. You know, they, as I said in my slideshow, you know, they devolve those decisions by and large to their agencies, and although they might have firm opinions about it, they by and large take their advice. So I think if you're relying on advertisers to fix it, then you're going to be sorely disappointed.
I think there's a good point there, which is there's a role for agencies to play, and I think they are beginning to wake up to that they are, I'm sure we'll know in this room, rather overspent on the 2 big guys. You know, hopefully this isn't just going to be a beat fest on the 2 big guys, because I think that you're right that you know, you probably saw my slides there is, look, I actually don't think we're being vocal enough about the good stuff that lots of premium publishers do. And I think the point there from P&G is that they don't think so either. They're not seeing publishers being as vocal as they should be about their strengths. I think there will need to be a lot more strategic alliances. So my prediction for next year will be a lot more interesting strategic alliances. There just have to be to give brands the scale they need and the access they need.
I think it also becomes more of a question about data. So for the marketers in the room and the publishers in this room, I think that there's historically been a gap in the data that each side has had. And now that each side is starting to own the data more and use that to make decisions, I think that the conversation can be more data-driven in defining success. And so for many of the publishers in this room, you have so much first-party data. You know who your audience is, you know how they're behaving on your websites, you know what they're doing with your creative, and being able to communicate that back to the agency and to the marketer, I think is basically like, think of that as your ammunition to win this conversation, and to help reference or change the frame of reference that many of them are using in their buying decisions on the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, for example. Because I think that there's an apples-to-apples conversation that can be had when everyone's referencing the same set of data.
That's obviously would be my mantra, is apples to apples and a data source that allows you to see across the entire ecosystem, because while the 2 big guys obviously have an enormous amount of first-party data at enormous scale, it's still 2 very big walled gardens, and if you like, there is still a third player, which is everybody else. And I think I heard Keith Weed up at the IAB Leadership Summit talk about in those terms that there's Google, there's Facebook, and then there's the rest, and somehow or other the rest has to come together and start talking with a unified purpose. Otherwise, the lobster's going to go very red. It's noisy out there. It's complex, it's noisy, and clients aren't the only ones who are guilty of looking at the shiny new things. And it's complex. It's the technology, it's people, and it's commercial models, and all 3 of those have to align, and it's not going to happen overnight. I do think to help clients see premium publishers as a unified force. Something more has to do. I think this is a very good forum for it.
Okay.
I agree, and as I referenced, there's just a vast array of different publishers, and you can't expect advertisers to even be aware of what they all are. There's consumers, they'll identify themselves as Economist readers, Guardian readers, PC Pro readers, whatever they might be. But to have a single point or even a collective sector such as premium publishing to have the amount of attention that it deserves, it's got to be easier for them to buy. It's got to be easier for them to see the data as a collective whole rather than a disparate number of different studies that are put together in different ways.
Also, we're not great as an industry of using consistent terms, and whether it's programmatic, whether it's response, whether it's brand response, there's so often you sit and you're talking at cross purposes, and I think we need to be consistent about premium publishers talking to brand advertisers or premium publishers playing in the response space, which you absolutely legitimately should be doing, but they're different conversations about different data, about different things.
Yeah, I think that going back to the consistency point, it's hard to be prescriptive about one or two metrics, but I think that looking at time, when you look at time as a commodity, if you look at the great sort of resource scarcities in society, there's land and capital, but now I think it doesn't matter how much money or capital you have or land you have, there's only 24 hours in a day. And so I think many marketers are starting to understand that really attention is a scarce commodity that we're all fighting for, and it's manifested itself in a variety of different ways. When coming from the U.S., the election cycle right now is all about a war on attention. Brexit was a war on attention. I think that these are all things that are truly kind of manifesting themselves in the way that we're framing society. And marketers are willing to pay more for attention if it's being communicated that they're buying premium attention. And I think that that's something that premium publishers in this room are offering at scale, but it's just maybe not always communicated the right way.
Great. Question down here.
Andy, you mentioned that you'd seen some deals taking place in the UK that were about cost per hour. So I think it's quite interesting because... Hi, Dilip from the AOP. And so far, having seen some deals that were done around viewability as opposed to attention, I've seen the agencies taking all of the upside. You know what I mean? You're not paying for the extra attention. You're just saying there has been attention on that ad. And I'm not paying for the things that don't have attention, but I'm not paying for things that have got more attention. Therefore, no upside for the publisher. Whereas I do think that if there was trading around cost per hour, cost per second, whatever it might be, then the publisher is rewarded for what they've actually done and delivered and what they're trying to do anyway. So it's an integrated thought. But have you seen agencies paying more?
So I think that part of it is that if you were to sell a bunch of viewable ads, you could build a website that just has 1,000 different ads on it that are all viewable. And so there's I guess the transaction around buying viewable ads is now becoming commonplace. But I think that as marketers are getting sort of savvier to what viewability is and also what the scarcity is, this cost per hour model really makes a lot more sense, especially in a premium context, because you can't put 1,000 hours of time in front of the user simultaneously. And so I think that over time there is a premium that's going to be paid for cost per hour just simply because it's a scarcity. You can't buy more of it without generating. I mean, the Financial Times isn't going to double the number of hours on their site overnight, but they could double the number of impressions on their site if they wanted to. They just add an extra couple of ad slots here and there. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Dilip. Any others from the floor? We've touched a few times on publishers cooperating with each other and maybe aggregating their audiences. I remember having lots of conversations with my friends from Dennis about aggregating the automotive audience, but I don't think we ever quite pulled it off. Have you seen any examples of publishers doing that together? And if not, why do you think that is? How could we stimulate that activity?
So I think the point was made in Mark's slides earlier about TrustX happening in the US. About 25 or so premium publishers are kind of rallying around kind of creating a way of buying their aggregated inventory, which becomes a very big scaled number. And I think that we're starting to work with TrustX as well around creating a common source of measurement and currency to measure across all of that as well. I think that that's also a key piece of making this all happen. But I think that the more premium publishers in the room can find ways to work together to aggregate scale, I think the better off we'll all be, hopefully.
I think there's one called the Panagea Alliance. There might be someone here from that particular alliance. I don't know if that's one still going. It's a pan-regional one for Europe. I think there's two things here. One is how do you wrap the audience up? I think that's really important, that scale piece. But the other thing, and I think probably for operations like the AOP, is how do we then train the industry on the value of the AOP? One of the things we try and do in our own little world is training for media agencies and for clients as well. As soon as we lay that kind of stuff on, it's one of the things we get most attention for is, what can you teach us new? Because what we're trying to teach them is not that, these two guys over here are bad. What we're trying to say is there's a big world out there, and to give new guys coming into the industry an understanding of the rich colour and contours of this, all the guys in the room, and how they can apply that best to their clients' challenges. Because sometimes you might need Facebook Live, but other times it might not need Facebook Live. And I'll give you a quick example. One of the pieces of research we've done on length of content, what's optimum. Lots and lots of clients we're working with at the moment are doing really complex messaging. So you look at things like fempowerment or pride or nostalgia. Lots of clients are trying to find social good causes, and those sorts of advertising takes a long time. You can't do a fempowerment ad in 30 seconds. You simply can't. Look at something like Always Like a Girl. It's about 3 minutes long. That sort of stuff is best in really strong, contextually relevant and grown-up environments. Guess where they are? They're here in this room, aren't they? So I think there's real opportunities to help and to really push your case forward with media agencies as well, to help understand the power of the media mix that's in the room.
Yeah. And I think when I was asking that rather unrealistic question about the agencies solving a problem for the publishers, that's what I had in my mind. Can agencies be more receptive to the ideas that publishers can generate, because there's an idea a minute in this room?
I think they are. I think probably there's also, if I can be a little bit brutal, I've come from media owner side. I spent quite a lot of years, like you, trying to do alliances across different media owners, and it was all a bit my ball. I'm sure we've all been there. So we had some great ideas. Did they ever get anywhere? No, they didn't. I think I've done one idea that was across lots of different media. But I think that time's coming. And what I would say is, what's been interesting for me, obviously we were bought by News Corp, and we thought there'd be a lot of doors would be shut to us because of that. And actually, I think there's an understanding that, look, we're better together. God, that sounds like a really awful political campaign, doesn't it? But there's actually a lot of strength in numbers, and I think there is opportunity to do it well and to bring advertisers really exciting stories.
Well, I think Mark referred to the IPA Effectiveness Week last week. There was such a strong argument for simple branding message. The value of a simple branding message in quality environments absolutely matters, has economically been proven to matter. And if anyone didn't see it, they should get the presentations from Les Binet and Peter Field. It was unarguable that there is a very big role for this world to play in the online space, in digital space, with brand building and awareness, which will drive a client's business. Now, it's not fashionable to go out and talk about long-term brand building in online, but it's absolutely critical, and you're standing on very, very solid ground when it's presented at the IPA, the agency's own trade body effectiveness week, that this matters. You need to go out and take that out. And it is a little bit of going back to old school disciplines. And I'm not only saying that because I'm old, but you shouldn't have to apologise for some very, very simple truths and using them. And what this room has is quality audiences at scale that can deliver controlled reach and frequency that drive brands. And you shouldn't take, if you go into the right group within an agency, if you go and talk to the insight team, they agree with you and they get it. If you go and talk to the trading team, they're going to try and beat you down on price and they're going to tell you that doesn't matter, they'd rather buy it in an open. That's the reality. That's not going to go away. It doesn't mean you have to give in. It just means you have to find a different way and you have to be very, very consistent with it.
Well, you've got to, the truth is you've got to play both cards. You've got to play the short-term effectiveness card because that's just where the industry is going. You know, think about by 2030, 80% of all media will be digital, outdoor, everything, TV, and of that, most of it will be addressable, and most of that that's addressable will be traded programmatically. So, you know, this rush to the machine trading is not going to stop. On the other hand, there is a growing fear amongst advertisers that they are being sold a problem for the future by their agencies. That everything being so short term is going to lead to long term decline. And that's already starting. I was interested in I can't remember who put the slide up, I think it might have been you, Dan, about the declining TV effectiveness or TV awareness, TV attention.
Yeah, TV attention.
And we saw a study from Hall and Partners that shows that TV awareness is falling in every category across the board, year on year. And a lot of that is to do, it's not only because of digital and it's not only because of divided attention, it's to do with this rush to short term. So even the advertising is worse. You know, everything's buy now, buy now, buy now. You know, and those messages that are set to build brands over the long term are just getting squeezed out by this rush to activation. So quite how this gets fixed, because there's two things pulling in different directions between short and long. But I think you need to keep repeating that message about the importance of brand, the importance of long term.
I agree. It's very easy for me to sit and, like I say, sound old school. I want to be very, very clear that when UCOM talks about data and independent data, data is not a zero-sum game. There is lots of data out there, and a lot of it is very, very valid. And the use of one data source doesn't negate the use of any other data sources. What it says is, here's a foundation that you can trust, that you can use traditional disciplines for about reach and frequency, sometimes demographics, sometimes time spent, source loss, everything else. But here's a foundation. On top of that, or after that, knock yourself out. Use as much data as you need to as you go down to the other segmentations and the other efficiencies and core targeting. It is not an either-or, but there needs to be a framework of the basics.
Very good. So any last questions before we wrap up? Okay, so it only leaves me to say thank you very much to our panel, Mark, Ian, Dan and Anik, particularly Anik, who's flown over the Channel to be, over the Atlantic even to be here. Big round of applause, please.